This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Shine all over this world, I'm gonna let it shine. Shine all over this world, I'm gonna let it shine. Shine all over this world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. What is that light? Light is the light of love. I'm gonna let it shine. Light is the light of love. I'm gonna let it shine. Light is the light of love. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Shine it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. I'm gonna let my little light shine.
Thank you, Louise Dobbs. Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. I am the Reverend Janet Gollery McKisson, and I'm honored to be the pastor here. You might be wondering if you're welcome in this space. You're welcome if you're single, if you're married, divorced, gay, transgender, non-binary, living in luxury, or living on the edge. You're welcome if this is your first time here, or if you've been here for decades. You're welcome if you're in recovery, or if you need a little something to make it through the day. We welcome you if you don't like organized religion, or if you do. We welcome you if you're disgusted by the damage that religious people have caused. We are too. We welcome you if you could use a prayer right now. Each of us here this morning comes with different histories, experiences, different hopes, different dreams. You may come here this morning after a 10-mile run, or you may have just gotten out of bed. We welcome whoever you are, whatever shape you're in this morning. We are honored and we're blessed by your presence. We are interfaith, so you're welcome if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you're Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, atheist, or some combination or something else altogether. Today is a holy day for many people. We just finished the Hindu festival of Holi, which is very colorful, and it talks about good triumphing over evil. It's a great, wonderful holiday, and we need more of that. And many are celebrating the spring equinox today. Nowruz, which means new day, originated in Zoroastrianism, marks the start of the Persian New Year today. So this is a day of fresh beginnings and newness and good triumphing over evil. It's a great day of blessing. At this time, I invite us to pause for a moment to acknowledge that we are all on stolen land. The church in Ocean Park in Santa Monica sits on the land stolen violently from the Quiche, the Chumash, and the Tongva. Their land was violently ripped away. Their families were torn apart and dispersed. Many people were killed, and many still live here among us, and for that we're grateful. We're also living in a country that was built on the backs and through the enslavement of Black people who were stolen from Africa. So we pause for a moment to recognize where we sit so that we know we must act. Let's pause for a moment. Every morning we center ourselves with the Thich Nhat Hanh chant. I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now 3 times. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived. I am home in the here and in the now. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park.
I want to sing a song now called People Holding Hands. And it's written by a wonderful singer-songwriter from Massachusetts named Richard Berman. Now, he mentions Walmart in here. Now, I would never walk into a Walmart, but so just know that. Holding hands in Walmart doesn't seem especially brave, but I was right behind them, and I saw the cashier's face, the look of shock, then anger, and the masking of that glance. So much feeling stirred so quickly by two women holding hands. The world is not in danger of succumbing to a flood, of being overwhelmed by a rising sea of love. Every kind of caring is a blessing on the land. It seems what's needed here is more, not less, of people holding hands. One of these women had a husband for over 16 years, and she worked hard to see herself as happy as she appeared. But there was a voice that called her from some place deep inside, that told her not to settle and would not be denied. Her father knows the gospel, he's an elder in his church, and for him his daughter's choice unravels his life's work. You know, you're killing your mother, he tells her when she phones, and once again she's made to see that there's no more going home. The world is not in danger of succumbing to a flood, of being overwhelmed by a rising sea of love. Every kind of caring is a blessing on the land. It seems what's needed here is more, not less, of people holding hands. I watch these women walking, and I am a bit in awe. They paid no heed to cashiers or others in this store, and I wonder about myself. I love another woman. Would I walk with her through Walmart? Would I offer her my hand? Now this world is not in danger of succumbing to a flood, of being overwhelmed by a rising sea of love. Every kind of caring is a blessing on this land. It seems what's needed here is more, not less, of going to introduce our speaker
All
today.
right. All right. I'm trying to gather myself. That song has affected me this morning in ways I did not expect. Thinking of my sister Carolyn and how difficult her life was, and trying to live boldly as a gay woman. So, some 10 years ago, we talked about racism, and it caused a great stir in the Santa Monica community. Imagine that, this town that folks have long thought of as being this liberal paradise. But the talk of racism some 10 years ago was still very taboo. But Molly Talcott visited our church and held a courageous conversation with members of the church and the Committee for Racial Justice. And we talked about the racism that the students and the overall community of Santa Monica were experiencing. And this is when we could barely talk about it above a whisper. And since that day, Molly has continued to show up whenever we call, and we need to have a courageous conversation with ourselves and with our community. Dr. Molly Talcott is a sociologist who is trying to be a better abolitionist and doing a damn good job at that. A poet, an organizer, a spiritual seeker. She teaches at Cal State LA, and she organizes with her faculty labor union, the California Faculty Association, CFA, and with the White People for Black Lives. So in case you haven't noticed, I'm a fangirl of Molly's, and it is such a great honor to be able to invite her today and welcome her. Molly.
Oh, thank you so much, dear Trudy. And I have to confess that even just the beginning of our time together has me fighting back tears. I'm so moved to be with you all. It's a profound pleasure to be with you here today. And I also want to especially thank Bob and Trudy for thinking of me, for inviting me to join you today in the celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Bell Hooks, and happy Women's History Month to all. So because Bell Hooks taught me not to fear the truth, I want to confess 2 points of trepidation in speaking with you today. One is that I've been thinking to myself, what offering can I possibly extend to the members of the church in Ocean Park about beloved community? You are a multiracial, multi-generational interfaith church in Santa Monica. You are practicing the love ethic that Bell Hooks wrote about and the beloved community she continually longed for and built throughout her life. So the other source of trepidation just comes from the impossibility of doing justice to her legacy today. So I will just invite you all to treat yourself to indulge in reading some of her more than 30 books, hundreds of essays, and watching her talks that can be found on YouTube. It's a true pleasure. But look, Bell Hooks was nothing if not intrepid. She was an adventurous, bold writer of her own life and a radical visionary. So now that I've confessed my trepidation, let's get on with it and be intrepid together like Bell. So how many of you, maybe give me a wave, are familiar with some of her teachings? Let's see, can I see face? I guess I can see. I see several. I don't see many hands, but I see several waving hands and thumbs up. In any case, let's reflect and celebrate her enormous gift to us all. I just want to note the multiple meanings embedded in the title of my offering today: belonging to Bell Hooks, beloved community, and the abolition of domination. First, I feel that I belong to Bell Hooks. I am of the people of Bell Hooks, her sprawling crew of students and accomplices. And second, belonging was a central preoccupation of hers. she was deeply committed to a radically inclusive vision of beloved community, which to her could only be fully realized with the abolition of systems, cultures, and practices of domination. So in this way, I view bell hooks as a prophetic abolitionist ancestor of ours. And the truth is, I'm still grieving. Bell Hooks only made it to age 69, dying of kidney failure on December 15th in her home in Berea, Kentucky. Her premature death itself was unsurprising, though, to those of us steeped in her writings, as she was emphatic about the ways in which white supremacy and patriarchy damaged the bodies and unjustly cut short the lives of Black people. So within the space of about a month, last December and January, we lost a great trinity of activist teachers. Bell Hooks on December 15th, Archbishop Desmond Tutu on December 26th, and then Bell Hooks' own spiritual teacher and ours, Thich Nhat Hanh, on January 22nd of this year. And while I mourned the loss of these two incredible men of color, I was also overjoyed for them as they lived to be 90 and 95 years old, respectively. And so we should be dissatisfied with the reality that Bell Hooks did not even make it to 70. Thich Nhat Hanh told Bell Hooks in a story she recounted often to turn her anger into compost for the growing of something new. So as we celebrate Women's History Month, I am composting my rage about the fact that along with Audre Lorde, Fannie Lou Hamer, Pat Parker, Lorraine Hansberry, and so many other brilliant Black women, Bell Hooks died too soon. I think she would also be a critic of that. So in honor of all their lives and work, we must continue our work to abolish domination in all its forms and the premature death it produces. And I also want to lift up the brilliant and revolutionary Black women elders who are continuing to radically write and envision our shared futures well into their 70s. Angela Davis, Barbara Smith, Alice Walker, Trudy Goodwin, since you named yourself as an elder, I'm going to throw you in there, and so many others. And as we praise the life and work of Bell Hooks and mourn her passing, what gives me so much joy and hope is that her work is alive in her contemporaries. Black women like Derricka Purnell, Adrienne Marie Brown, and Patrisse Cullors, Black spiritual teachers like Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, Ruth King, and Prentice Hemphill, they too belong to Bell Hooks. And so the context for how we encounter teachings is so important. So I'll share a quick story of mine to help connect the dots a bit. In the mid-1990s, I was in college in Orlando, Florida, when I found my community, a small band of freaks and radicals, all of us with searching hearts and various marginalized identities. And while most of my professors were white, they assigned Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks. And as I read their writings, I began to feel deeply in my soul that it all had to change. Bell Hooks, in the 1990s, in the middle of Central Florida, centrally shaped our emerging feminism. We called ourselves anti-racist feminists, to be precise about our allegiances and our political lineages. And this pleasure of deep study was a collective one. My friend Dorcas and I spent hours discussing Bell Hooks. One very late night at the 24-hour diner called the Coffee Shop, we had eaten, we'd had pie, coffee and Sprite refills, and we had paid and left a better tip than we probably could afford. The coffee shop was not busy, and there were plenty of empty tables. As we talked passionately about Black feminism, the project of building relations of solidarity between Black and white women, sitting there together, she in her Black body and me in my white one, a white sheriff sitting in the booth across the aisle interrupted us. He told us that we needed to leave, that since we were done eating, we were now loitering. To this day, Dorcas does not remember this incident. It was one among many in her life of a white male police officer directing racism and sexism at her. For me, that moment was formative. I felt in my body that it was our embodiment of multiracial beloved community and our public and passionate discussion of anti-racist feminism that led him to banish us, to interrupt our radical communion. So when I was having these formative experiences like this at age 20, I was also reading bell hooks. We were together reading bell hooks. So I want to share this one passage in her 1995 essay, Beloved Community, A World Without Racism, where she named the longing I was feeling. She put words to it. Here she writes, quote, "Many citizens of these United States still long to live in a society where beloved community can be formed, where loving ties of care and knowing bind us together in our differences. We cannot surrender that longing. If we do, we will never see an end to racism. These days, it is an untalked about longing. Most folks in this society have become so cynical about ending racism, so convinced that solidarity across racial differences can never be a reality, that they make no effort to build community. Those of us who are not cynical, who still cherish vision of beloved community, sustain our conviction that we need such bonding, not because we cling to utopian fantasies, but because we have struggled all our lives to create this community. In my Blackness, I have struggled together with white comrades in the segregated South. Sharing that struggle, we came to know deeply, intimately, with all our minds and hearts that we can all divest of racism and white supremacy if we so desire. We divest through our commitment to an engagement with anti-racist struggle. Even though that commitment was first made in the mind and heart, it is realized by concrete action, by anti-racist living and being." So that's the end of the quote. And so this was the context, living in Central Florida in the 1990s, a difficult decade for a young 20-something emerging radical, in which bell hooks became a towering prophet to me. And while her enormous body of work is impossible to adequately honor, I'm going to offer you some bell hooks bumper stickers, 10 takeaways, themes, rules for living, loving, and transforming ourselves and the world that I think she offers us. So number one, beware and be clear about imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. So this is a term that bell hooks insisted upon long before today's popular understanding of white supremacy as a system existed. Bell hooks mostly rejected academic jargon. She tried to write for regular people, even while struggling inside the cult of academia. But this 5-word phrase was her efficient way of reminding us that these systems of domination are always interconnected. It was also a way to signal that people of all identities can and do participate in these systems. For example, women often participate in patriarchy, people of color collude with white supremacy, and so on. And this also means, of course, that people of all identities can refuse complicity with these systems. Number two, use the mirror and the magnifying glass. Bell hooks was committed to practicing the feminist idea that the personal and the political are linked, that we must take a magnifying glass to society and its systems of domination, and we must also hold up a mirror to our own lives, both in community with others and inside our inner psychic lives. In one talk, she said this, quote, "It's that understanding of accountability, that we are all accountable. That is our democratic space of belonging. As long as we are only projecting out there to the other who is oppressive, we cannot really have belonging, because belonging is really about the acceptance, the deep and profound acceptance that we are all capable of enacting that violence, that estrangement, that colonialism, that imperialism, and to be able to be vigilant in our lives in asking, where do I enter into that?" Number three, the intellectual, the political, and the spiritual are one, and they're all rooted in love. Bell hooks described herself as a militant radical feminist, and also as a Christian Buddhist whose work is rooted in an ethic of love. She's shown us that intellectual work, that understanding and challenging domination is an act of love. She said this once, quote, "To me, all the work I do is built on a foundation of loving kindness. Love illuminates matters. And when I write provocative social and cultural criticism that causes readers to stretch their minds, to think beyond set paradigms. I think of that work as love in action. While it may challenge, disturb, and at times even frighten or enrage readers, love is always the place where I begin and end. Number 4, education is the practice of freedom. Bell Hooks insisted on the transformative power of education. Educating ourselves and one another is a profound way of practicing freedom. Number 5, creating a strong sense of home matters. Bell Hooks taught at Yale, Oberlin, and other elite institutions. She made the intentional decision to return to the US South, to Appalachia, to return to Kentucky, and to teach at Berea College in the latter part of her life. Going against the advice of her cosmopolitan friends, she located her institute and personal papers there. She viewed this as a homecoming. She loved small town life and staring out her window at old oak trees during long writing stints at her desk. Number 6, creating a daily spiritual practice is key to crafting a meaningful life. Bell Hooks has shared that she routinely began her day with prayer, meditation, inspirational readings, and then she would think about the question, what will be the service that unfolds in the dailiness of my life, in the local world that I live in? How will I love, give, and serve? She made a space for solitude and this form of contemplation. Number 7, beloved community is a practice, not a buzzword. Not only did Bell Hooks write about beloved community, she practiced it and noted that this practice often requires courage. For example, Laverne Cox was her first invited speaker at her institute in Kentucky. Some of her colleagues and even her own family members refused to go, saying that Cox, as a Black trans woman, was an abomination. Bell Hooks made it clear that she would not tolerate such violence. She had a serious interest in the radical inclusivity of beloved community and had long-standing relationships with people who did not share her identity, but did share her commitment to love and liberation. And I've been so moved just to be a witness to her conversations across difference, the way she was always both such an uncompromisingly self-possessed Black feminist, and also so clear that we need each other, that patriarchy is a prison for men too, that white supremacy is a prison for white people too, and that we must never give up on the project of building beloved community. Okay, number 8, start where you are, in your body and with the earth. Bell Hooks often referenced Buddhist Pema Chodron's phrase, start where you are. Sometimes this meant she asked the question, what are white folks doing to decolonize their mind, right? That call to self-reflect. Other times this meant turning to the earth and to water. She once said this, quote, this is our global challenge right now, to have the willingness to embrace all of the conditions of the world. And I think it starts with the earth, with water. I mean, people are constantly talking about oil and gas, and you know, we can live without oil and gas, but we cannot live without water. And millions of people in this world are struggling to have water, clean water, thousands of children dying daily because they don't have clean water. So there we see that our connection to love begins in the body and the needs of the body. And one of those needs of the body is the need for water to live. Number 9, the revolution is made of joy and humor. Bell Hooks has said, quote, we should have delight. We should take joy in struggle. If you're struggling in some way where you can't find any joy, it's time to step back, reevaluate, and consider, is there a struggle that can restore me to that sense of joy? She's also noted that there can be no revolution without humor. And if you watch videos of Bell Hooks, you'll appreciate how funny she is. She's snarky, teasing. She pokes joyful fun at her friends and at herself. And I'll close with number 10. To be loving is to be courageous. In her book, All About Love, highly recommend it. Bell Hooks writes this, quote, to live our lives based on the principles of a love ethic, showing care, respect, knowledge, integrity, and the will to cooperate, we have to be courageous. Learning how to face our fears is one way we embrace love. Our fear may not go away, but it will not stand in the way. Those of us who have already chosen to embrace a love ethic, allowing it to govern and inform how we think and act, know that when we let our light shine, we draw to us and are drawn to other bearers of light. We are not alone. So thank you for listening. That's my offering. Appreciate being with you.
Written by a group called Mamuse, and I put the words there so you can join with me. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. So I'm going to sing that again. We shall be known. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
That is, the song makes me emotional after Molly is here and look at all around us. If we're known by the company we keep, that's a pretty good sign. Look at the company we keep. Come on, hallelujah. I can never believe it. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Molly, for your amazing talk about this wonderful, courageous woman. We now have time for community sharing, which is a time for that anybody can raise their hand. You can see that some people already have done it the Zoom way, which you can do by going to the reactions, push on reactions, and right at the bottom, there should be a thing saying raise hand. If you can't find that, you just go like this, and if I see you, I'll call on you. We don't want your voice to be left out because you couldn't figure out the crazy Zoom thing. So, and we'll call on people in kind of random order, so don't worry if you don't have to notify me you went out of order or something. So we're going to call first. I would like to see what call on Gail. Gail, do you have something to say?
Okay, yeah, I just want to thank you so much, Molly. Talking about the trepidation, which I have been experiencing. Yesterday, I was working on a lecture for my class coming up this week on anti-bias curriculum. I teach early childhood education. And I started to feel really anxious talking about, being truthful to children around the nature of racism in our world. And am I going to, step on toes, which I'm sure I will. And even more so, the fact that my chair is going to be observing me this week. So you gave me a lot of courage. It gave me focus. I'm going to do it. I knew I was going to do it, but now I feel much more certain in it. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you so much. Craig, Ali?
Thank you. In looking at the movement, we've always, at least I've always been sensitive to the idea that when white folks attack people of color, it doesn't have the same kind of, at least to me, it doesn't seem to have the same kind of urgency than when white folks attack other white folks. In looking at what's going on between Russia and the Ukraine, we now see this sense of urgency. And we here in Santa Monica have also been victims of where people in authority don't necessarily prosecute those hostile folks against us. And they've directed that also against other white folks. And in major instances like the Civil War and World War I, with Hitler, after that has been done, that hatred and that wrath has been revisited against other people of color. And so my question to you, Molly, is if we look at it in the eyes of bell hooks, what would we say would be the strategy or the thing to more or less address that hostility, specifically amongst those white folks who are looking for answers, who are not necessarily open to truth and are swept up in this racist thing, because many of the folks that have attacked us as part of the Committee for Racial Justice have been young white folks. So I'm wondering specifically what words of wisdom can we look at in terms of neutralizing that hostility and that anger.
Molly, do you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Craig, and also thank you, Gail, as well. It's a very profound question, and I'm sure bell hooks would have a more brilliant response than me. But one thing that is a challenge is that as you all know, beloved community means all of us, right? It doesn't just mean people I want to like or people who are like me and on the left and interested in social justice and spiritual awakening. But that's difficult when there are communities of people who are out to destroy one another, in terms of, I think the call, which, dates back, a long time, decades, centuries, the call for white people to do the courageous work with other white people. It's easy for me to dispose of them and say they're not woke like me, right? And all the cool people I'm with. It's another task entirely to say I'm willing to do the work, to reach out, to risk, being rejected, being even a victim of violence, because words of love are threatening to those who are so committed to domination. But that we keep at it. I wish I had a better response, Craig, but it's just that to take heart that we are not alone, we've got each other, and that some of us are more, should be positioned to do different kinds of work than others of us. It's why, when we have actions, white people for Black Lives are doing security, police liaisoning. When we take over streets, white folks are in the front, because we know that police are less willing to run over white bodies than bodies of color, than Black bodies. And so in building that community, I think we can have those courageous conversations and build clarity about which roles are more appropriate and even safe, for those of us with varying bodies and identities. But it's a massive question. I think we just have to keep asking it and keep trying things, being experimental and courageous together.
Thank you, Molly. I love that. And because we will make mistakes and it's okay. Yeah. Reverend Joseph?
Yes, thank you very much for that message. It was very educational for me, because I have not been exposed to many of these liberationist writers. But I was looking at the life of Chimamanda Adichie, the Nigerian writer and poet. And she, listening to one of her speeches once, she said that it was because she was a feminist that she was able to appropriate a sense of joy of life and humor to bring her through the deaths of her mother and father. They both died in close proximity to each other. But I wanted to find out what you think. Do you feel that men are feminists? That's the question.
That's the question. Thank you, Joseph. Yes, I do. And I certainly know from my familiarity with her work that Bell Hooks does as well. And a friend of mine who was a profound, comrade of Bell Hooks is Kevin Powell. And he's a writer. If you're unfamiliar with Kevin Powell, he wrote some years ago, he's written many books, but some years ago he wrote an autobiography of his life, healing from violence, healing from patriarchy, and embracing, the kind of sort of radically interdependent worldview, feminist worldview that Bell Hooks espouses. And Kevin used to sit at Bell Hooks's feet, in her apartment in New York. And they, one of the most beautiful things is you can watch their conversations, their relationship on YouTube, on various sites on YouTube. But Bell Hooks was deeply committed to men healing from patriarchy, Black men healing from, that combination of patriarchy and white supremacy. And she was very invested in men who committed to that work of healing themselves and, of course, the world along with it. So I think that's one of the things I love about her work, is that although she became popular for her Black feminism, for the phrase imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, she was very clear. And I think her spiritual rootedness helped clarify this as well, and her histories of struggle, that people of any embodiment, any identities can be feminists, can be traitors to white supremacy, right? Can be critical of capitalism, imperialism, war, that we all have the capacity to do that work, to heal ourselves and each other with new frameworks. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying a resounding yes. Men can be feminists, and men should, for their own healing and transformation, be feminists.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Molly. Bob?
Okay, first, I have a word of self-congratulation, and then a question. I want to congratulate the worship committee for deciding that having a talk on bell hooks would be a wonderful, idea for one Sunday in Women's History Month. The question is, who is the best person we could find to give that talk? And Trudy for saying Molly Talcott. And boy, was she right. Thank you, Molly. That was just so deep and rich. And my question would be, of all the books that Bell Hooks wrote, if you had to recommend, if someone came to you and say, can you just give me one? Is there, it may be that no one would be the one from your point of view, but first I want you to repeat the one about love. Is it all about love? Okay. I want to read that. I know I want to read that. Yeah. I have read a couple of Bell Hooks's books, but for all of us, is there, say, one that just stands out to you that you would suggest starting with?
Ooh, Bob, that is, first of all, thank you for your very kind words. That's a very difficult question. You all really know how to ask challenging questions. I think it really would depend on, each person, like where they're at. So for instance, her book, which is a short book, Feminism is for Everybody. Mm-hmm. Maybe if like to Joseph's question, maybe if you're a man and you're like, can I be a feminist? Where do I fit? That might be a great book. Feminism is for Everybody. It's short. You can also get it if you type it in and then type PDF. You can get it online as a PDF. These things are out there. One of my favorites is I quoted from it, Killing Rage, Ending Racism. That was published in 1995. But Bell Hooks really took that turn to begin to write explicitly about love, and she's noted that being an intellectual. A lot of intellectuals have been in the closet about love, believe it or not, about being spiritual, right? It's seen as sort of not intellectual and sort of like Western snobby academic circles. And she was really bold in saying, no, these are deeply interconnected, understanding these social systems and practicing an ethic of love. So I feel like this book is really important for these times, all about love. I feel like a lot of our movements are struggling, which is also why I'm really appreciative that the Committee for Racial Justice will be hosting a book club about Patrisse Cullors' new book, because the interpersonal work is also the collective work of transformation. So those are a couple, but I agree, teaching to transgress is the reason I went to graduate school. So impossible question, Bob, but she's written amazing books on Black masculinity. There's a book called We Real Cool that I highly recommend as well, along with her first and classic text, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, which she wrote as an undergraduate somewhere around here. But that's, if you want early vintage Bell Hooks. And I also found out that the first thing she published was actually a book of poetry. I haven't been able to find it, but it's moving to me that Bell Hooks began as a poet.
Great, thank you both so much. Claudia?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I will quickly tell a story about Church in Ocean Park providing a forum for a courageous conversation and love that made a difference in our family. Our son brought home a young woman from Colombia, and it was to talk about getting married. And this was over the Christmas holidays, and they went to our Christmas Eve service and then Hurley Jim's gathering in the morning. And then difficult conversations started to seem to ensue. And what came out is this young woman confided or started talking about to my son that she was lesbian and that getting married probably wasn't the right thing to do. And it all happened because of her spending some time with the church in Ocean Park, and I presume that touching something in her that she realized she had to express. Well, needless to say, they broke up, and it was hard on both of them because they really loved each other. And she left behind a pair of earrings, and I would love to send them to her, but I guess they're mine to keep. And I often wonder, in a way, you just think about this young woman was from Colombia, went to Milan, met my son there, and then happened to come by Santa Monica for 2 weeks. What would have happened if she'd never done that? So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. That's very nice. Linda, and then Jean, and I think that will be done.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Molly. There's so much there's so much that we've talked about this morning. It's just very rich. So I asked you to repeat, in the chat, the first bumper sticker, because I want to ask us to beware and be clear about the way the media is forming current events, and particularly in regard to imperialism. I think at this point, and it is with some trepidation that I raise this, because I think it's unpopular at this point to call out US imperialism. I think it's unpopular at this point to call out the role of the United States and NATO in provoking the Russian attack on the people of Ukraine. I think it's unpopular at this point to frame what's going on in Ukraine as a proxy war between the US and NATO on one side and Russia on the other, fighting to the last Ukrainian standing, right? And I think that it's important to beware and be clear of the role of imperialism. Otherwise, we'll do what Malcolm said, right? That if you're not careful, what's this quote from Malcolm? If you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And I want to encourage intrepid conversations that do not just frame current events in the way that the New York Times and the Washington Post are framing them.
Thank you, Linda. Very important. Very important. Yes. Jean?
Well, I'm sorry, but Molly was nodding. If Molly has something to say about that, I'd like to hear it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Just nodding in agreement with the spirit of bell hooks in my heart. I think I can't speak for her, but I imagine she would wholeheartedly concur that the only winners in war are the weapons manufacturers, and empires anywhere are to be dismantled. Yeah. So.
I agree. Thank you, Molly. Jane Gasca.
I wanted to talk about creating beloved communities in schools. Between administrators and teachers, between administrators and teachers and students. So many students hate going to school, and I think it's because they're not beloved. They're seen sometimes as adversaries, especially when they get to middle school and high school and they start acting out. And that's where I spent most of my 40 years in teaching. And I was amazed by how alone I was in meetings talking about, we have to love this child who is acting out and find out what is going on, why this is happening. And there was punishment, there was taking away of art and PE and after school sports if kids didn't do their homework. And I have to say, it was really frustrating when kids came for 6 months and didn't do their homework in my class. But sometimes I would sit with them at recess and have a discussion and find out what was going on, and this is not about racism totally, because I was in mostly Black and brown schools for the last 10 years that I taught. And most of the administrators and many of the teachers were Black and brown as well. So I'm not talking about black and white right here. It's about adults and children. And I know that Gail will agree with me because she and I have taught together and talked together so much about teaching children. So I don't know what the answer is. It just seems like such a huge institution. Teachers, I already told you that. Why don't you understand it? That kind of thing. It's just, it's such an institution, and our teachers don't learn nonviolent communication. So I already know the answer to this. It's the same as anti-racism. It's one step at a time. It's loving one person at a time. And I'm proud of the love that I gave my kids and the understanding that I gave them. But it was really hard to be a teacher in those places, because I got fired twice for speaking out, and people didn't want to hear it. So I thank you for your words today. I don't think I need advice really. It's just we all just have to keep on keeping on.
Just a comment, Janet, because I was looking here and I saw Bell Hooks wrote, there are a couple of poems she wrote. One is called When Angels Speak of Love. And another poem is called And There We Wept. Those are two of her poems.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you. Thank you all for your sharing. This has been a very rich time, and thank you, Molly, again for your sharing. And you instigated a lot of reading, I believe. I think many of us are right now ordering books, and we'll get back together and talk more about them later. But thank you so much. We'll be moving to a song now with Louise Dobbs.
Yeah, thanks. I want to bring out a song that I don't think too many people know. It's pretty old, from the 70s, by Holly Near. And I know, Molly, that you do work in union organizing. So this is about that. If Nicolaya had a boat, if Nicolaya made it her home, if Nicolaya sang a song, she would sing Harbor Me. Nicolaya girl worked inside a factory, never saw the sun, never felt the summer sea. She dreamed someday she'd meet a prince, she's been real disappointed since Nikolai, a girl, got a big idea somehow. And she's sailing now. Nikolai, a girl, found a book called Organize, and she understood every word to her surprise. So with an old sail and a novice crew, she made a great big wave on the ocean blue. Nikolai, a girl, got a big idea somehow, and she's sailing now. Nikolai, a girl, sings her favorite working songs to let the people know now's the time to move along. Small boats on a mighty sea, small girls in a factory. Nikolai, a girl, got a big idea somehow, and they're sailing now. And they're sailing now.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Louise. We sail in each other.